All right. Awesome. Well, thank y'all again for joining us. I'm so happy to introduce Sarah Norton and Jess Clayton. Sarah Norton is the past chair of the Disability Inclusion Network Business Resource Group, and Jess Clayton is the current vice chair of the Disability Inclusion Network. And this is a business resource group for members of the disabled community and allies in Washington State. And they're both here to share more about the Disability Inclusion Network and how you can help make things more inclusive and accessible. So, Sarah, Jess, take it away.
Hey everyone, thank you. Give me just a moment to share my screen. It always takes a moment to set this up. So hopefully everyone can see my screen now and see me. So thank you so much. I am Sarah Norton and I'm here with my co-presenter, Jess Clayton. And we're going to talk about what is the Disability Inclusion Network. Before we get right into that though, I'd like to do a few introductions. I'm going to introduce myself and then I'll pass it over to Jess. Again, my name is Sarah Norton, she, her pronouns. I am a Caucasian female with naturally rosy red cheeks. I have long, dark brown braided pigtails with what I like to call natural silver highlights. I'm wearing black plastic framed glasses. I have on a white t-shirt, and you might be able to see a little of the design. It's black and purple stars and a moon. And I have on my work lanyard, and I just have to share this because I got a new button for my work lanyard that says, please be patient with me. I'm from the 1900s. I'm very proud of that new work button. I thought it was fantastic. I am the acting co-chair of the Disability Inclusion Network. I have been a chair in the past. And I'm going to pass it to Jess, who is going to introduce themselves and then get us started. So Jess, are you ready?
Yes, thank you, Sarah. I am Jess Clayton, they, them pronouns. I am the current DIN vice chair, and I am the chair-elect who will become the chair on January 1st. So very excited to be here. I am just sharing my screenshot today, not my actual screen, due to bandwidth. I am a white appearing bald individual with wire rimmed glasses wearing a blue polo shirt. And let's go ahead and get launched. So, who we are. The Disability Inclusion Network officially launched in August of 2019. We are supported by the Governor's Executive Order 1302, so one of the older BRGs. This includes several directives in the executive order, including a disability employment challenge that establishes a goal of every state agency, every Washington state government workforce area having 5% being comprised of individuals living with a disability. DIN strategizes and guides state agencies on how to achieve employment goals in the areas of recruiting, hiring, retention, and promotion of individuals with disabilities, while also providing education and advocacy support. We provide consultation on accessibility policies, public outreach, as well as writing best practices for inclusion. And more recently, this has become really applicable for all state agencies, as there were 3 new federal regulations issued at the beginning of this calendar year in April and towards the end of April and at the start of May. The Americans with Disabilities Act was updated for all Title II entities, which is all state government is included in that, as well as everyone that contracts with us for services. It also updated was the Health and Human Services Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. All of those updates have a really important impact for state agencies moving forward. They are now requiring us to be digitally accessible in our public facing and our internal systems. We also have a state policy that I know Vic will be covering a little bit later on that. But that digital accessibility requirement also includes a plain language aspect to it. So we've all got this wonderful chance to change the culture we work in to be fully accessible for all individuals, including individuals with disabilities. And we will be doing a lunch and learn in the spring that is geared towards non-IT and accessibility professionals about what all these laws and regulations mean and how we can all play a role in making sure things are accessible. So stay tuned. So that's DIN, who we are generally. We've got our mission and goals. Excuse me. We want Washington to be truly the employer of choice for individuals with disabilities. We want to create an environment where people with disabilities can fully participate in all aspects of our workplace and have equitable access to opportunities and resources in the whole range of the hiring through job life cycle, promotions, recruitments, trainings, development, all of it. Part of our goals for this year are to continue to provide support to state agencies when it comes to accessibility and provide that education about the history of disabilities and what disabilities are. Our values include commitment to diversity and inclusion, expanding resources and education about working with the disability, commitment to employing people according to their skills and vision, development of leadership opportunities, particularly for employees with a disability, improving and influencing Washington state agency culture through increased awareness and open dialogue, and support and advocacy for Washington state service employees, allies, and their caregivers. And I just want to note that individuals with disabilities are everywhere. You may not have a disability right now, but in the course of your life, it's incredibly likely that you will have at least a temporary disability at some point in your life. So it is one of those fluid associations. And for this population, just because you're not part of the disabled community right now, doesn't mean that you won't be later or that you haven't been in the past. And so disability inclusion is really about inclusion for everyone. And then the final slide I'm going to cover before handing it off to Sarah is the opportunities that our business resource group provides. And that's networking, professional development, leadership development, educational resources, diversity awareness, best practices, and we also provide advice on and advise state agencies on disability-related policies and work groups. And now over to our wonderful co-chair, Sarah.
Oh, I just lost my mouse, so give me a minute so I can actually get to the right slide. Thank you so much, Jess. Greatly said, well said too, about, you might not have a disability now. Also, current statistics show that 1 in 4 people in the US have a disability. So I think there's like 170 of us in this room. So if we divide that by 4, we get at least 60 of us here have a disability, right? That's a whole lot of people. I think I did my math. No, I did not do my math right, but you get the point. 40 to 45 of us. Obviously, I was not hired in my current role for my mathematical ability. That's what a calculator's for in my mind. But basically, just to say what Jess said, it's everywhere. People with disabilities, we do everything. So a little bit more about what DIN does in regards to helping people with disabilities. We have 3 subcommittees. So if you join DIN, you don't have to actually be involved other than just come to our meetings. But maybe you want to get a little more involved. Maybe you've got some skills or abilities that you want to develop or you want to offer. We have currently 3 subcommittees. The first committee is our Disability Justice Subcommittee. The goal of this subcommittee is to really identify gaps and barriers for people with disabilities, including those who have additional intersectional identities, right? Because disability affects everybody. No matter what other identities you have, you can also be disabled. And so, like I said, increase that awareness of intersectional identities. And disability justice provides training and educational materials related to disability justice. One of the things we just closed, I believe 2 weeks ago, was an annual survey that DIN puts out about attitudes and beliefs related to disabilities in the workplace. We'll be creating a full report on that, but we went from 296 replies last year to 465 this year, which is absolutely phenomenal for a small group to put out this survey and have that many people fill it out for us in such a short amount of time. So the Disability Justice Subcommittee does a lot of work on that. And they will also be working on a full report of the results of that, which we will share far and wide. It will be on our website. Anyone who wants it, we will email it. So please stay tuned. We have a Resources, Education, and Policy Subcommittee. This subcommittee will partner with employers, leadership, agencies, and sometimes even legislators to support people with disabilities and obtaining and maintaining employment within the state. This group will consult with hiring managers on all different areas related to recruitment, training, retention. They provide resources, including videos, trainings, educational materials. One of the big things they do is they create and source guides that we put out. And I have a slide on the next page about some of our current guides. And they do a lot of work on that. And we do have a guide that should be coming out by the end of the year on reasonable accommodations for medical reasons for the employee and one for the employer. And this really just talks about what reasonable accommodations are in very plain language, and helps employees better understand their rights and their resources. And then also employers, which would be geared towards anyone who is a supervisor or up, on what their responsibilities are and information they should know about reasonable accommodations. We also have a third subcommittee, our Communications and Marketing Subcommittee. Their big task is about our website, making sure it's user-friendly, that it meets all accessibility requirements, provides great information about who we are and what we do. I'm actually putting the website in the chat room right now. It's dinbrg.org.
Show all day.
The Communication Subcommittee also ensures that, oh, it sounds like somebody isn't on mute. So if you could all just check to see if you're on mute, that would be perfect. Thank you. This subcommittee also ensures that the stuff we put out is accessible, right? Digital accessibility, all of that. They help making sure all that happens. Hold on, sorry. And then they also provide technical assistance to other BRGs. So if other business resource groups need help with making things accessible or have questions, they do a lot with helping with that. So I talked about some of the guides and materials that we put out. Currently, DIN has 4 guides that we've put out. These are all available on our website under resources. We have a mental health and community resources guide, fantastic guide that breaks down resources both local, state, and nationally. And it's broken up by different communities. So we have groups for people who identify as Asian or Pacific Islander. We have a section for people who identify as Black or African American, for veterans, LGBTQIA+, people who just are looking for disability resources. It includes mental health resources. It also includes things like food banks, diaper banks, clothing banks, all of that. So it's a fantastic guide that we have out there. We have a tips and tricks for inclusive virtual meeting planning. We have one about just basic disability inclusion in the workplace. It answers questions about different types of disabilities, such as vision, hearing, mobility, respiratory, chemical sensitivities, neurodivergence, and some great information on just like when interacting with people with disabilities, what are things to remember? For example, don't touch somebody's mobility device, right? Don't touch their wheelchair, their walker, their cane, unless you've asked and there's a reason. We also have a fantastic inclusive recruitment and interviewing guide that's out there that just talks about how to make sure from the beginning of writing your job description all the way through interviewing is inclusive for people with disabilities. And again, like I mentioned, by the end of this year, we should have our reasonable accommodation guides out. And thank you for the comment. Vic noted that they really appreciated the guides online and highly recommend them. So thank you so much. Another thing that DIN offers is informational booths. We will come to your event and we will bring fidget toys and candy, including sugar-free candy. We've done events. We've done Public Service Recognition Week. I think we've done it for, 3 years now. I can't remember how, I think it's been 3 years they've done it in person, maybe 2. We've gone to the Office of Equity convening that they have, the Office of Inspector, OIG, we'll call it that because I can't remember what it stands for right now, had an employee information event, a street fair. We've gone to the L&I hiring fair. We also went to the Deaf Nation annual conference. It's not held every year in Seattle, but a few years ago it was held here and we went to that one. We've also done many other events. These are just a few. We have a great table we can set up with information. There'll be at least one person from DIN there to answer questions about DIN or just sometimes talk to people. So please let us know. We can totally come to your event in person. We can't guarantee every time, but as much as possible, we can be there. We also do presentations along with this, where we just say who we are and what we do. We've presented at numerous state agencies and also at our own every other month general membership meetings. We talk about just disability justice, accommodation, veterans with disabilities. We've presented on National Human Rights Day, National Disability Employment Awareness Month, Black History Month, Women's History Month, Native American Heritage Month, LGBTQIA+ Pride Month, Juneteenth, Disability Pride Month. I mean, if you have a topic you'd like us to present on, reach out and we will work with you to help. We have some presentations that we've already created and then we can tailor them. Or if we need to create something from scratch, we absolutely can. One topic that didn't make it up there, not sure why, is neurodivergence. We've done a lot of presentations on neurodivergence recently, which is fantastic that more people are becoming aware of that and wanting to make much more what we call neurodivergent affirming workplaces. Right. Let's see what else. We also will bring in guest speakers and have special events. We've had people come to talk about resistance and wellness, also resilience. Paid family medical leave. We had someone from the Employment Security Department come and talk about that program. We've had people come to talk about Holocaust Remembrance Day, creating accessible documents, ADA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act, and reasonable accommodations. Recently, we had someone come and talk about Medicare for yourself and your family members, all about the program, applying for it, where you can get help applying for it. We've also had people come and talk about legislation that's affecting people with disabilities in Washington State. We try to have that happen once a year, if possible during session, so people can be aware of what's going on, what's trying to go through session and how it could affect people with disabilities. Our meetings, when do we meet? Well, we have general membership meetings and subcommittee meetings. Our general membership meetings are every other month on the odd month. So like January, March, May, July, September, November. We meet from 9 to 11 a.m. via Zoom. We're open to all Washington State agency employees, and this needs to be updated because we are now open to the administrative office of the courts. They just finalized and approved their policy, so now court employees can also become a part of the business resource groups, which is so exciting. All of our meetings, we provide ASL and CART captioning. And then on the even months, that's when we have time for our subcommittees to meet. So February, April, June, August, October, I have take December off. We take the month of December off for any meetings and events, just solely because it's such a busy time for everybody, whether you celebrate or observe holidays or work-wise, it's coming up on the end of the calendar year. Children have time off school. So we just take that month off for everybody. These meetings, again, are the second Thursday of the month from 9 to 11, also via Zoom. Open again to all Washington State agency employees and employees of the Office of Court. Again, we also provide ASL in CART for those meetings. We also sponsor a monthly meeting called ASL First for American Sign Language. This is a safe space for state employees to network, share resources, support each other. It provides some education, outreach, and advocacy. And this is geared towards people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or similar disabilities. ASL is the primary language. However, ASL interpreters and CART is provided. And again, this is not a place for people to learn about the deaf community or to learn sign language. This is for people who find themselves in the deaf or hard of hearing community to find community with others who face similar challenges. However, if you were interested in attending a meeting to find out more about it, reach out to DIN and we can get you connected with the people who run those to see if there'd be in a meeting that's appropriate for you to attend if you are not part of that deaf or hard of hearing community. Because we do not gatekeep. We just like people to know what this space is for, so they can know if it is something that might be right for them. So those are the meetings we have right now. Again, our general membership and subcommittee meetings are the second Thursday of the month. And then this is just our contact page. It has our email, our website, current co-chairs are myself and Linda Lodefink. Current vice chair is Jess Clayton. Our current secretary is Kim Harmon. Our current executive sponsor is Michael McKillop, who is the director for the Department of Services for the Blind. And we cannot say enough about how amazing Michael is as an executive sponsor. And that was all we had to tell you about DIN in a nutshell. But we would love to open it up to any questions. I am going to stop sharing my screen, if I can find the right button. And then if anyone has any questions, let me see. I see a question in the chat room. What if there was a meeting that was conducted with ASL with an interpreter speaking for the hearing? Let me read that again. So I think, yes, so Linda answered that. The interpreter voices for those signing. Yes, so in the meetings we have an interpreter who will be the voice for anyone who is using ASL, and then they will also sign anything that's spoken for people who are unable to hear that. I hope that answers the question, but if not, please let me know. And if anyone else has questions, you can use the chat room, raise your hand, take yourself off mute, whatever works for you.
This presentation. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jess. Yeah, feel free to pop those hands up, come off mute if you have any questions. One question that I did have for you, Sarah and Jess, just while folks are kind of getting their fingers or mouses going. I was just curious if DIN offered partnerships with state agencies. I mean, you guys have so many resources, as far as improving like your recruitment processes. Is that something that state agencies can reach out to your group for if there are certain processes that they want to improve to make more inclusive?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking. We often will have agencies also reach out to us and ask us to review policies, procedures, any of that, with a specific lens towards disability equity. So we love to do that. That's part of what we want to do. And so if any of you here are working on policies or procedures or just anything in general, please reach out to us because we can meet one-on-one, we can come to a group, or we can just review documents and provide written feedback as well. Yeah, it's definitely something we love to do. Just reach out to our DIN email. I will put it in the chat room. It's also on the slides.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah or Jess?
And I see a comment in the chat room from Talia about the guides being super helpful and given to supervisors during SUP orientation. We definitely encourage this. Please, as if not, giving them a hard copy because that's a lot. But please feel free to download our guides. They are download them, email them, share them on your website, all of that. They are there for open use. So.
Thank you. Well, I know folks have access to your slides that has all of your contact information. If there are any questions that folks think of and want to reach out to Sarah, Linda, or Jess, I'm sure, their door is always open and they'd be happy to hear from you and partner with you all. So appreciate you too for coming and just sharing a little bit more about the Disability Inclusion Network.
Thank you so much for having us. I will say, folks, I do need to hop off the meeting, unfortunately. But I believe Jess may be able to stay on, and we also have secretly in here our other co-chair, Linda Lodafink. So if other questions pop up, and then Jess, I'll let you if you want to say anything as well.
Yes, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. And I will be staying on through the rest of the meeting in case there's other questions that come up.
Thank you both so much. All right, well, with that, we will transition over to our next presentation. I would love to introduce Vic Vong. Vic is the Digital Communications Accessibility Specialist at the Washington State Office of Equity, and they are here to teach us some best practices on making digital presentations accessible and to ensure that, we're all in alignment with our state standards. So with that, Vic, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Vic. I use they, them pronouns to give you a visual description. I'm on camera right now. I'm an Asian person with black hair, so out to my shoulders. I'm wearing some glasses. I'm in a room that looks kind of with a blurred background of pink and reddish, and this is what I do for my light sensitivity. So glad to be here with you all, and I'm excited to share some more. And with that, I am going to share screen. I believe I have permission to do that, Teresa. Okay, great. And I'm going to open up this one. All right, so I'm about to go full screen, but you should be seeing a Microsoft interface, Microsoft PowerPoint interface. Can someone give me a nod if they're seeing it? Okay, great.
Looks good.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about making your PowerPoint file more digitally accessible. On this first slide, I just have our logo, my name, and my position, Digital Communications Accessibility Coordinator. And to give you a little background, I work on the communications team, and I basically help the office make sure that our website, our content, our presentations are accessible to people with disabilities. And today's date is November 19th, 2024. Thank you for being here and for following along with me. On this slide, I always just like to, check in on access. I will try to monitor the chat. I think I'll be screen sharing. So if there is something I'm not seeing, if someone could please tap me on that. I gave a visual description of myself, and I encourage others to do the same if they feel comfortable when they're presenting. Any important points from my presentation during my screen share, I'm also going to describe verbally, so you don't have to worry about missing anything if you are perhaps joining by phone or are doing something else because of low bandwidth. And I also will try to describe acronyms when they're needed to understand the takeaway. And one of the reasons why I do this, one of our deaf and hard of hearing community members, and their name is Jesse. They were telling me that, it's great that government agencies are starting to send them materials. They're starting to ask them for feedback on their policies. But when they they go to the presentation or they open the file and there's all of these jargon and acronyms they don't understand. And it takes them a really long time to try to figure out if they understand what's going on in that document, and then makes it much harder to give feedback because you don't understand what's going on, and then eventually you give up because you can't figure it out. So wherever I can, I really do encourage people to define acronyms, and I will try to do that during my presentation. If I do forget, please let me know. My ask is that you please share your name before speaking. If you do have a question, you can start it off with saying like, "Hi, my name is Beth, and my question is da 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 da," and that'll help me know who's speaking if there's multiple people on camera, and also it helps us, I think, keep track. So it's not like, oh, you have to recognize the sound of someone's voice. Other than that, please feel free to stretch, stand, or whatever works for you. And please tell us if you need help. If you are having trouble viewing the captions or you're having trouble with something else, we will try to support. I've also put on here, you can visit our website, equity.wa.gov, and we have a contact us button. And under that, there's like accessibility info, just more info about our accessibility approach if you want to learn more or give suggestions. I'm going to pause here just to make sure. Sometimes things come up as people are listening. If there are any thoughts, any questions so far, and we can get comfortable with silence. I know that when I have a poor internet connection and then it lags, and I want to ask a question, but someone's moved on. So I try to make space for that when I can, if you are someone that does have a question. And if not, that's totally cool. Okay. So a little bit about our office. We are the Washington State Office of Equity. A bit about our mission and vision. Our mission is that everyone in Washington State has full access to the opportunities, power, and resources they need to flourish and achieve their full potential. As you may know, in Washington State, we have executive orders relating to the employment of people with disabilities, people of the global majority, and historically underrepresented folks in state service. And we are also looking at, of the public that's receiving state services, are they receiving it in a way that reduces disparities, or are there still barriers? So our vision is to promote equitable access to those things that we do as a government to reduce those disparities and improve the outcomes statewide. And I always like to just give a little visual. This is our Office of Equity staff collage. There's a lot of us now. I think about a year and a half ago, I think there were a handful, like maybe 6. And now we do have a tribal liaison. We have an accessibility team. For a while, it was just me, but now we have accessibility team, which I'm super excited about. We have communications folks. We have folks working on pro-equity anti-racism. It's also called PAIR for short. That's the acronym. And just really want to share our faces so that you can get to know us, get to see the variety of backgrounds, of skin tones, of religions, and in fashion styles that we have. And that I just feel super lucky to work here. And we want to, one of the feedback we got during one of our user studies was that their experience with state government was that people are very faceless or nameless. Like you can't find their information, you can't see who they are. And so one of our priorities that we got great feedback on with our user study was, oh, like I can actually see their picture and I can actually see their name. And as we move into the next year, we still want to be thoughtful about privacy and security, and we still want to make opportunities to connect with the public and be accessible and knowable by the public. Today, for our time together, I am going to be focusing on a couple things. This content was taken from my 2 separate trainings that I had. One of them was Intro to Digital Accessibility. And the second one was PowerPoint accessibility. And what I realized was I was just going to do the PowerPoint accessibility, and I was like, but that's going to be hard to follow if people don't understand digital accessibility, or maybe they haven't had a chance to learn more about it and aren't familiar with it, because it's definitely not included in, I think, like a mainstream curriculum for communications, or I guess in general. So I'm going to be briefly introducing digital accessibility, and then I'll be moving on to some of PowerPoint's basic concepts to help get you started on how to open the accessibility checker, what is color contrast, and what is alt text. And at the end, I will have just like a slides of resources for further learning on each of those topics. And I think for today's time, I want to make sure we have people get time to ask questions about the things that we do cover. And I do encourage people, if they want to learn more, to figure out with their agency what their training is like. I think every agency is determining their own training. So your training on accessibility might be slightly different, but I'm just picking the ones that I think will be pretty consistent in terms of requirements, regardless of which agency you're at. So those are the pieces, and then there'll be more resources later on for further reading. And let me make sure this is lagging. Okay, it's fine. So our next slide is just going to briefly talk about assistive technology, or AT. You might have heard of this term, you might not have heard of this term, but they are tools that help people with disabilities to navigate the physical and digital world. And part of why this is important is, if you think about it, since the start of the pandemic, a lot of services, and even before that, a lot of services are happening online. And so while physical accessibility in person at an office is important, we also want to think about, how are people finding us digitally? Are people having barriers in how they're interacting with us, understanding content, or applying for state services, or any of those things? And one of the tools you might have heard of is called a screen reader. The screen reader can support blind and low vision folks to get the same content. A screen reader, if maybe you haven't tried one before, it's a software that basically reads a web page or a file out loud. And what's important about that is understanding how screen readers navigate through a document, and then setting up your document so that it is compatible with people's assistive technology. And I'm going to pause here. I know I'm just throwing out a couple concepts pretty quickly to see if there are any questions I could address. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm just agreeing with the comments. I saw Linda put in here, we need to be sure to plain talk our topics and information on this, as most people are not techies, and that's definitely true. And oh yes, and thank you, Talia. Talia put the link to the demo of a screen reader for the public, and it's something that you can watch if you wish, and it kind of gives you an idea. Okay, so how does a screen reader user go through a page? What are they looking for in terms of headings, in terms of links? And so this past year, we were very fortunate. We did 2 user studies with people with a variety of disabilities, and we saw, how do they interact with our website, how they interact with our files and our content. And then we've also been really blessed to have a lot of great community feedback from deaf and hard of hearing community members, and from deaf-blind community members, about what can we do to make sure that our presentations are accessible to people with disabilities. And, you know, there might be a variety of ways that people also identify. Some people prefer to say, you know, person with disability, others prefer you to say disabled person. So we try to be respectful of, you know, how people may prefer to self-identify. And even when we talk about some of this tech stuff, I want to acknowledge, like, sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm not a coder. I don't do like the website coding stuff. I'm trying to learn, but I try to remember that. And when I am bringing this to folks that I'm working with, like, hey, maybe we didn't know about this feature in PowerPoint. We can learn together, and then we can use it. And it is something that, one way that we can support inclusion. Oftentimes, if there's a lot of out of our control, it can be kind of stressful. But one way that we can be supportive to our teams, to the folks that we work with, and with the public, is to make sure that our presentations do have those accessibility pieces, so that people don't have the experience of, oh, everyone can view this, but not me. And that can add to a compounding effect of, like, oh, this was not made for me, and maybe I'm not feeling like belonging, or I'm not feeling like I'm really welcomed here, if they're continually met with files and other things that can feel exclusive, can feel exclusionary. So that's one reason why we want to think about, what are the assistive technologies that people are using, and then how do we make our documents and our PowerPoints make sure that people are able to get the same access to that information. And just to build on this, I know Jess mentioned earlier about, some of our state and federal policies. And you might be wondering, is digital accessibility required, this practice of making content accessible? And the answer is it is. We think about how many of our state services and info are online today. How does this impact employees with disabilities? How does it impact our ability to retain and promote employees with disabilities? How does this impact members of the public with disabilities? And when we think about this, I've talked with like community members. Hey, they use Secure Access Washington every day, which is a state site. They use it every day to log their reports. What happens when the form they need to submit does not work with their screen reader? And there are other examples. There's so many examples. People have talked about, I think, agencies are improving or attempting to improve their employment of people with disabilities. But what's the experience for the person if the apps that they need to use in their daily life and the content is not compatible with a screen reader? It makes it much, much harder to do their job and to fulfill their daily tasks. And so when we think about working with folks, working with the public, and all these different things, we want to make that as inclusive as possible. Otherwise, we are potentially creating barriers and further exclusion. And when we think about, the digital world today, yes, we need internet access and accessible documents. And we recognize that there's so many things we use every day that we're asked to use as an employee or we ask the public to use to get state services. And it's really important that there isn't an unintentional barrier to folks who are blind or have other disabilities. And I think one way to think about this is if you try to fix stuff at the end of the presentation or the end of the cycle of selecting a product or making content, it's going to be much, much harder than if you examined those things from the beginning and then you included accessibility from the beginning. So let's say you chose a color scheme that had low contrast and people had a hard time seeing the text on your slide. That then means that you have to change that on every slide at the end. And so when we think about the cycle of creating content, we are pushing and encouraging folks to know that every state employee is creating some type of content, whether it's an email, a PowerPoint, whatever the case may be. And what can we do to help embed that awareness from the beginning? How do I choose a high contrast combination from the beginning so I'm not creating additional problems and I'm also not having to do a bunch of attempts to fix it at the end? So in that way, when we think about the life cycle of making something, we want to consider it from the beginning. And that is going to set us up for more success. Related to this, there is also the state policy. It used to be called Policy 188, and it's by WATEC, which is, I think, Washington Technology Systems. And it's their policy, the one that established that people with disabilities need to have equivalent access to the same services and content that's available to those without disabilities. I do believe they're in the process of updating this policy. If you're interested in being involved or just subscribing to updates, I believe there is a Gov Delivery sign up that I can share after the call. But just to know, like, yeah, we need people to give feedback, and we're also pushing so that to make it a priority for agencies as not something that can be pushed off because it's affecting people today. It affected people yesterday, and we have multiple people in state government who are trying to do their work and they're dealing with inaccessible content or other inaccessible things. And we don't want that. It gets in the way of them doing their job, but it also doesn't necessarily support belonging if people are having that experience where, oh, yeah, everyone can access this except for me. So it's me and my soapbox. There's so many stories. There's so many like anecdotes. But those are all shared with permission. Just so you know, like, oh, okay, there are people who are impacted by this today, and we need to work on this today. And don't be too intimidated. I know a lot of it is technical, but we're going to focus on some of the easier to reach concepts, and then you can follow up with more learning if you wish.
Hey, Vic, this is Teresa. Sorry to
Oh,
interrupt you, but Jennifer Phillips had a great
oh
question
yeah,
in the chat. Speaking of screen readers,
yes,
can you elaborate on ways to test content with screen readers if we don't have immediate access to these?
sure. Yes. So I have a couple things. I think one of them, okay, so two of them, the two of the one that I'm thinking of, it will have, it might depend on your agency. In the software center, um, I believe state employees have access to something called NVDA. It stands for non-visual desktop access. And then I think you're able to download that, but when you do that, you are going to open the file, and usually if it's a PowerPoint, I would open it in Acrobat because you'd be exporting it in PDF. And then you would be tabbing through the items to hear the order in which things are being read and how the images are being described. And that is one way to go through it if you don't have immediate access to it. I would say some other options if, like, let's say you're having trouble getting NVDA, some options that can help you understand the concept. It doesn't have the full functionality of NVDA. One of them is actually in Microsoft Edge. I would not recommend it as like an actual alternative, but if you are really, really new to screen readers and you want to hear a little bit of what it's like, in Edge, when you open a PDF, they do have in the URL bar something that says read aloud. It'll be like an A with like two apostrophes with quote marks, and that'll give you an idea of what order in which the screen reader will go through the items. And what you'll be listening for is it voicing my images alt text correctly? Is it reading it in a logical order? Another option that's inside of Acrobat, and you will need Adobe Acrobat DC, which is I think believe also through the software center. So it may require supervisory approval if you don't already have it. They do have a read out loud function. It is not as like consistent and full-fledged as a like an actual software. But with that one as well, you can hear the order in which things are being read on your page, and also you can hear the alt text that's being read. Um, and even if, let's say, like you're not totally comfortable with screen readers yet, which I understand, they're kind of technical. Um, I think ways to address this without a screen reader are to actually use the accessibility checker that we're going to go over today. Let's say that you're not ready or don't have access to a screen reader. You can check on these things within PowerPoint. Um, and the nice thing is that they're in PowerPoint still. So if maybe you're not ready or can't get access to the full screen reader, you can emulate that experience with Read Out Loud. It's not the exact same, but it gives you an idea within Adobe. Does that answer that question, Jennifer? Let me know if there's any follow-up, please. Oh yeah. Yeah, someone's in the chat saying NVDA is available in Software Center. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah, it may not be authorized at all state agencies. So it may, again, I think it depends on your agency's policies. If you, I think with the way the agencies are set up, it depends on who manages you as a tenant, your agency as a tenant. And so that's one way to test it. It looks like HCA Healthcare Authority has it available for download. I believe Office of the Governor has it. I don't know about, I guess most of them. Like, I can't speak for all the other agencies, but that's one way to think about it. Oh, and yes, Andy is a resource. I did not know it was a federal resource. So Jess is saying Andy is a federal resource and is acceptable to download by all state agencies. Yeah, that's another example of a Chrome browser. Well, I guess it's on Edge too. You can add it, and it will kind of like you can look at the headings, you can look at the alt text, and that can give you an idea as well. Mm. Okay, apparently some agencies take issue with NVDA as it's based out of Australia. Yeah, so that's part of the challenge is like, and this is going to be in the slides at the end. I've listed a bunch of resources. Some of them might be dependent on your agency. Some of them are available to everyone, but it will depend on your agency, whatever they are willing to have it to give it access with. And absolutely, please work with people who use screen readers when possible. This could be a user study, as we've done, or informal consulting. And oh yes, as a New York State employee, it should be on your desktop. And if you cannot find it, you can send a ticket to OFM. Oh, not if you're not on OFM, I guess maybe not. Whoever handles your IT, ask them where the software center is for yourself. And they'll be able to help you because that's how they're helping you download all the apps you use for work anyhow. Great questions. Okay. The next thing I was going to touch on was actually the accessibility checker. So luckily now, in PowerPoint, when you open it and you start a new set of slides, there is something called the accessibility checker, and it is on this bottom panel. I've circled it at the very bottom, and it says accessibility investigate. There's a big red arrow and circle next to it. And so it is on this bottom panel when you open PowerPoint in full screen. And I have found that this is not, you can do that if you're a mouse user, but just in case you're a keyboard user and it's painful or hard for you to use a mouse, you can instead press the Alt key in Q to search for accessibility checker, or you can press Alt plus R to open the review, then press A1 for accessibility. So just wanted to provide some other methods in case there are folks that are preferring keyboard shortcuts. Once you do that, the panel for accessibility is going to pop up on the right of the screen, and it's going to say accessibility assistance. In that, it's going to tell you what they noticed about your color contrast and your media, and then the top, there's a ribbon that's going to come out, and it says in the middle screen reader, and so that's a place where you can find your buttons for reading order pane. That's where you can find your buttons for alt text, and we'll talk about what those are in just a second. And if you wish, you can open up PowerPoint right now and check it out. And so one of the things that's going to ask for is color contrast. So what this checker does is it goes through your document and it says, okay, with this color in the background, which combinations are easy to see. Usually we do go for like light colors on dark backgrounds and dark colors on light backgrounds. And our goal is to reach the 4.5:1 contrast ratio. This is just a ratio that symbolizes what the difference in lightness and darkness is between two colors. And it's one way to tell, okay, so how can people see my color easily, and can I test the combinations I want to make? So if you are using from the beginning, you choose two colors that work well together and have good contrast, it will save you a lot of time rather than if you realize at the very end, oh crap, like all of my text is like a color that is not visible against the background. So in this slide and on this screenshot, I have an example of building your own palette to see what are the accessible color combinations. And for example, let's say that I really wanted to use this item in the first row, the light blue background, sorry, the second row. And I want to see, okay, if I combine it with other colors, which of my other colors can I use it with for it to stand out enough? And in this particular palette builder, it's letting me know, okay, so for light blue background, if I combine it with black text, I see the letter A there and in the background, and that's letting me know, okay, this is a good combination. It meets the 4.5:1 contrast ratio. And then the next color that it tests against is purple text. And there instead, I see a gray rectangle, well, a gray line with this strike through it. And that basically means, hey, this does not meet the 4.5:1 contrast ratio for the difference between light and dark and with that combination. So I'll make sure in my presentation I won't be using those two together. If I do use the light blue, I'll be using the black text or the navy blue text, since that column shows that is an acceptable contrast ratio. And you can keep doing this for a lot of different colors. So I put also my navy blue in here and I compared it with my other brand colors. You can input whichever colors you want. And then it's telling me, hey, you should not combine the navy blue with these colors that are faded black, purple, or navy blue, but you could combine it with light blue text or cream text. And so this isn't it's like not saying that it's basically saying there's enough contrast. You can always go for more contrast, but this is one way to test, hey, do my two combined like colors work well together? I'm also linking on this slide the site where I did this comparison with the screenshot. It's your own accessible color combination grid. And then below that, there's another one. It's the Web Aim Contrast Checker. I like both of them. Part of the reason why is because on a state device, I think you're limited in what you can download. And so these two are nice because you don't have to download anything. You can go to open a new browser tab, put in your colors and test them that way. Some other color contrast, you have to download something. I think there's more, there might be restrictions against that. So these are the two that I recommend personally to test colors without having to like download something and all of that. Are there any questions on this slide or the content so far? I'm going to take a quick look at the chat. Okay, I see. Are there any questions? Okay, so I see the screen reader comment. And then oh yes, and this presentation will be shared. And I guess the part of it too to say is, so in my typical presentation for the office, we give specifications about the font and the size. And I found that actually across, I've talked to people at Washington State School for the Blind and other places, they actually have different, they use different fonts. And so for us, we use sans serif fonts. So that means they're not the ones that are like cursive looking. But for other agencies, they might use a serif font. And so that's one of the ones where I was like, even if I tell you, your agency might approach it slightly differently, so I don't want to confuse people. And that there are lower, I suppose, contrast like threshold if you have larger text, if you're looking at larger text. And trying to look if there's any other. And oh, okay, yeah, it looks like there's a plain talk work group. I feel like there was another question that I maybe missed. I saw somewhere, I don't know where it is anymore, but someone made a comment about testing on mobile as well. And yes, that's one thing that we include in our user studies as well, is we need to test the mobile view. We also need to test the desktop view. And if for whatever reason, let's say that like it's not showing up correctly, that is something you want to test, especially if you have folks who don't have a laptop and they're accessing things via their phone. And we want to test how it's appearing for them to make sure that it is appearing correctly. And so now I'm going to get into the alt text a little bit. So you might remember I talked about screen readers, and it's a text description of something visual. This could be a photo, it could be a graph. This can support access for low vision or blind folks. It can also support folks who have limited internet or slow internet and can't load the photos. One possible like kind of option formula that I use is subject plus action plus context. You're saying what's in the photo, what they're doing, and what's the setting like if it's relevant. And when a screen reader gets to photos, it's obviously not going to be able to read out photo, but it can read the text alternative that you set. So that means that when you're making the PowerPoint, whatever you're trying to get across by including the visual, you are writing a text alternative that's communicating the message that you want to share. And this is an example. This is from the Disabled in Here photo shoot. It was a photo shoot designed by disabled people of color. And for this particular group, they preferred disabled person instead of person with disability. And so on the right, I have this image, and the alt text for it is overhead shot of 6 disabled people of color at a rooftop deck party. An indigenous two-spirit person with a prosthetic smiles directly at the camera and gives a thumbs up while engaged in conversation. While everyone else is engaged in conversation. And so this is one example of a photo. And I think whenever possible, we want people to write their own alt text because we don't know how they identify, and we don't want to guess or assign identities. So wherever possible, we do want to match how they describe themselves, and wanting to include, again, the subject, the action, and the context. And in terms of how to set this in PowerPoint, it is pretty easy in PowerPoint. You can right click the image and then you could click view alt text. So once you right click the image, there's a little menu that's going to pop up and it says all these options, including view alt text. And then you can go ahead and open that. If you are a keyboard only user, your alternative for right clicking is pressing Shift and F10 and then pressing A. And that's because of the underlined A here in alt text. And then once you do that, this panel is going to pop up on the right and it says alt text and it says, how would you describe this object to, and it's context someone who's blind or low vision. And that's if it's relevant, if it's important to your presentation. If it's not, and you're it's just there for aesthetic, you can mark it as decorative. That means that a screen reader is going to skip over that. And part of the idea here is you as a user, as a content creator, you're curating what message you want to be conveyed to people. And that's part of just making the presentation. And when you open the accessibility checker that I mentioned earlier, you will see it'll tell you if anything's missing alt text or it's missing something, maybe it's auto-generated. I don't recommend the auto-generated description, keeping that. I do recommend that you write it manually. An example is if I put our logo into a slide and something auto-generates, I think it usually says something like an image of a cartoon. And that's not what our logo is. It's a logo. And so we get to make sure, hey, we're including the words that are in the photo and we're making sure that those are all viewable, all available to whoever's viewing our content. Are there any questions on this so far? Okay, someone's adding another link for Are My Colors Accessible? Yeah, and other people are giving examples of fonts. Yeah. So yeah, it will depend on your agency and your practices. For our agency, we were using Myriad Pro and they realized that a lot of people didn't have that font. So we default to Arial if we're on devices where people may not have the other font installed. And that way, when we export it to PDF, it doesn't change the Times New Roman. Sometimes if someone doesn't have the font, it'll change the Times New Roman, which is usually not what we go for. Okay. Oh, and then, well, I guess, yeah, in PowerPoint, you will mark it as decorative. If it's online, there's not a mark. If it's like a web page, which would be different, you want to give it an empty alt text so it does get recognized as decorative. And the next topic was, how do you set reading order? And so I mentioned earlier, when you open up the accessibility checker, it's going to open up the reading order panel. And in this, just in case, I just put the instructions on how to find it again. And this is what it looks like. It says display the reading order pane. And once that happens, you will see the items on your slide from top to bottom, and it's telling you, oh, this is the order in which my things will be read. So if there's anything I don't want it to be read, like aesthetic, like a line that I placed there for aesthetic, I would uncheck it. I want the title to be first because that's the heading, and then I'll make sure my text box is going to be read in the order that I would like, and then at the very end, I want the picture. And you can make sure, hey, if you want to alt text, you would set the alt text, but if you didn't, you can mark it as decorative or uncheck this. And are there any questions on those so far? Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't find my hand raising feature. This is Jess Clayton.
Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to call attention that if you are building the PowerPoint, rather than checking at the end that it is accessible, then when you have your PowerPoint open from your home tab, go to the drawing section, the arrange drop down, or it might already, depending on your ribbon, already be available. And then in the under arrange, you want to click on selection pane. That allows you to create elements in your PowerPoint based on the reading order that is intended. It will go from bottom to top. If you think layers, it will read it then opposite, top to bottom, on the reading order for check accessibility. But when you're building it, you build first the first thing you want displayed, then the next thing, then the next thing, so that the first thing you want displayed is going to show on the selection pane as the bottom one. And that's another way to build it to accessibility. So I'm not sure if everybody was aware of that, but that's where you can build it from accessibility, and then you can check it at the end in the exact way that Vic just shared.
Thank you, Jess. Appreciate that. I'm just going to check to see if there are any questions. Yes, and Teresa put in the directions that Jess just mentioned. Thank you for that. And then these are just resources for further learning. I know for state employees, you will likely be able to access the Learning Center, but your agency's accessibility guidelines might vary. I still recommend that you ask your agency's training lead or accessibility manager. Some DES, Department of Enterprise Services, who manages the training for many agencies, it may have a fee and it may require you to get approval from your supervisor to register. But I also included some just in case, we have folks who are not in state government, or the login or permissions will be a lot. So we have also in bullet number 2, open to the public resources. There's no login needed. I have this page with web aims, with web accessibility in mind. They're also called Web AIM PowerPoint accessibility page, and it has things in written, just instructions. And then the one below that, it is the library accessibility resources from SBCTC. That's the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges. And then just in case, I also put some keyboard shortcuts for PowerPoint presentations. If folks are, keyboard heavy users and they are not able to, or using a mouse is painful, just want to make sure folks have that option. There are also some on LinkedIn Learning. I think this, again, it depends on your login and your agency's policies. But yeah, the first section is state employees. Like, you will be able to access that. And the second one, it's like no login needed. Anyone can view it publicly online. And then for alt text and color contrast, I just have these links that I recommend. Let's say that you are thinking about whether or not to write alt text for a particular image. This is a decision tree that helps you think about what it means and what to describe it as. There's some more, thoughts and ways that we can be inclusive in our alt text, because we want to be intersectional in how we're approaching accessibility and including racial equity, and thinking about what is the intersection of access and disability justice and racial justice. And then on these bottom 2, I have the color contrast links from that slide where you can test it. These are the ones that you don't have to download, so there won't be any issue. It's more of just opening a page in your browser. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you. If you have more questions, I think I can also put in a link to our checklist that we just made available. But really, hopefully, it's to get folks introduced to the idea of what could be fit into this this time. I also have my email, the access requests for our office, and then also our social media channels. So just thank you everyone for your time, and really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Vic, for that amazing presentation. I think for me, it's always so helpful just to learn the different ways that folks approach making sure their presentations are accessible. So really appreciate you just sharing your knowledge and information with us. Jesse actually had a question in the chat. In the past, if we had a slide with a full picture or something where we didn't want a heading for aesthetic purposes, we've hidden the title either off the slide or behind the photo. Then we've put in the correct order in the reading order pane. Any thoughts on whether this is a helpful practice?
Yes, so PowerPoint has something called hidden title, and you can also access that from the accessibility checker, and it'll say, hey, if you don't have a heading, do you want to add a hidden heading? And what it's going to do is it's going to add a text box like slightly above the top of your slide where you can put your text, and it won't show when you're showing the slide, but it will log for like the outline purposes and the screen reader purposes. Hey, this is the heading. And yes, we do want it to be the first item. So it's off the slide and then it is the first item. I think there are some cases where it can be behind like a full graphic, and I think that's fine as well. Just making sure that's still like it's still reading before the alt text for your photo. Thank you for the question.
Awesome, thank you. And I see Missy has her hand up. Hello, nice to see you. And I love your blonde.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Missy Sterling. I'm with the Healthcare Authority. Vic, this question is not to scare anybody else on the phone call, so it might be a little bit early in conversations, but there is a recent DOJ ruling related to digital accessibility, and this is impacting the entire nation, not just state organizations. So what I'm curious about is the Office of Equity taking any sort of role in that? I know the DES has mentioned that they're looking at what types of trainings they can put out, but just as a standard level set, I don't typically anticipate those being highly useful, and not until they come out, because by the time they come out, we should have already done a bunch of work. And so what I'm curious about is specifically the Office of Equity. Is that organization going to be positioned in terms of setting standards for the states and our organizations? Or is there any, again, I might be early on this question, but is there any sort of lead role that you might be taking related to that or your organization?
Yeah, so I think if I'm understanding the question, it's about asking if the Office of Equity will lead like some of the state efforts or set the standards for state agencies. Is that the question?
Yeah, mostly on standards, but yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, so to give some context, yeah, I was curious about this too when I joined. So I learned that WATEC is the agency that sets the standard for state agencies. As far as I'm aware, we don't have we can join and we can, you know, advocate. From what I've seen, we are not setting the state policy, and in the process so far for the new state policy process, it's held by WATEC, Washington Technology Services. And I really encourage folks to get involved if they, you know, are interested. But they are setting the standard, and we can add things. We've tried to add things, and I think agencies are you know have feedback about how they want they want their agency to be able to determine how their agency does it because they know their agencies work the best. So that's what we have right now.
Sorry, can I ask just a follow-up really quick?
Sure.
Are there any
Yeah.
points of contact from WATEC related to that? We've heard rumors that they have a web accessibility work group, but we haven't been able to solidify a contact or anything like that.
Sure. I don't know if you've met Tavares Terry, but he is the director of, I think, DI at WATEC, and he hosts the Digital Accessibility Community of Practice. And I'm trying to think of the best way if WATEC has a page where you can read more about that. But that is a group that exists and that you know shares resources about you know like even just beyond like what's technically required in the state or federal, like okay, what does that mean for state employees? What do we do if our technology or software doesn't have that function yet, and what do we do in the meantime, and what can we advocate for with vendors and whatnot? I'll think about the best way to get the link, or I might just email Tavares. I think it'd be a good idea because they do manage that community of practice.
Awesome, thank you. Great question, Missy. Any other questions for Vic? Awesome. And Jess did drop Tavares's email in the chat for you, Missy, too. While we just have a few minutes, you know, Vic, I really appreciated just the alt text reminder. I think that's something, as we host a lot of kind of conferences and receive a lot of presentations, that has been kind of one of the biggest barriers that we here have seen. And I love the formula subject plus action plus context because I feel like everybody kind of does their alt text a little bit differently. So I'm just curious, Vic, if I know you shared some resources on this, but what would you say, is there too much detail versus not enough detail? And how do we find that balance, or is there a standard of kind of what information should be included? Because I've seen, alt text describing what people are wearing and, just their features as well as kind of the action in the photo. But I'm just curious what your take on that is.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very common one. I would say one thing to know about alt text is we want it to be as brief as possible. It'd be a little different if we were like describing an art piece for the purpose of someone experiencing the art. But if it's like, hey, this is a photo in my PowerPoint, and I just want people to get the gist of it, we want to include the most important information at the beginning, because if there is long alt text, what we found is sometimes folks skip them if they're like, hey, I can't tell if all of this is important and it's really long, so I'm going to skip after the first few words. So what we encourage is that you include what's critical. You can think about it, hey, if I was talking over the phone with someone, how would I describe this? And what is important from this photo to include? One example that's, I think, the standard to include is if there is text in the photo, please, please, please include that text in the alt text. And if it's a more artistic thing where there needs to be more detail and the experience is intended to be, more full, I think it's totally fine to go with longer alt text. But I think you'll find in many apps that the alt text there is a character limit. I don't think there is in PowerPoint, but there are in others. So trying to be brief and just in terms of like thinking about for your user, how do I tell them what they need to know about this photo? And if they don't need to know about the photo and it's like there for aesthetic purposes, skip it so that they can get to the content that they are looking for, and don't have to like guess, is this important to the slide, or is this like here just for additional detail?
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions for Vic while we have them? Well, Vic, thank you so much. I think so we have an updated presentation that we received last night for Vic, so we'll make sure to upload that to our website so you all have the helpful resources that they have for you there. And just appreciate you sharing just your knowledge, Vic. And I'm sure if folks have your contact information, can't recall if that's on the new presentation, but I'm sure feel free to reach out if you do have any more questions. So appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right, well, we have 4 minutes left. So just want to, oh, perfect, got your email address in the chat. Thank you so much. Just a couple minutes left. I know we typically save time at the end of the presentation for a little bit of just round robin project shares or any barriers that anyone might be facing in their continuous improvement efforts to kind of knowledge share and get some other perspectives. So just curious if anybody wanted to share or had any questions on anything they're working on. Hearing none.
Well, looks like there's a question in the chat. Jamie says, I'm curious if there's any agency approved AI note takers or if anyone has had success with getting these utilized in their meeting spaces. That's a good question.
Oh, that is such a great question. Personally, Jamie, I am afraid of AI, so I haven't really stepped into that world, but I'm sure there are folks on the call who may have experience with that. So anybody have any experience or have been dabbling in AI note taking?
Not in the workplace, just personally on my iPad, I use Notability.
Notability. Oh, very good. I know Jess mentioned that none of these so far are fully accurate with the Public Records Act. So using AI note takers will still require manual remediation and correction. So good thing to point out. That's definitely some research that we could do and get back to you on that, Jamie. Sorry, I have a doggy in the background. I think someone's walking by. Great. Shiloh says they have a link. They have an official word on AI in state government. So thank you so much, Shiloh, for providing that. Any other questions or barriers anyone has experiencing?
Well, before we go, I just want to say thank you to Vic, to Jess, and to Sarah. This is the first time we've had the BRG DIN and the Office of Equity at the table. So we are so excited to have you all. Thank you for all the great information you provided today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate just the knowledge and just always continually sharing and helping others just improve within their work. So appreciate you all. I think we're at 11:59. So I think we'll be able to wrap up early. If you want to take the survey, let us know what you thought of today's presentations. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we will see you next month. We have Rain Carey and Ray Simpson from the Washington State Department of Corrections coming to talk about redesigning quality indicators to improve treatment outcomes and job satisfaction. So, last COP of the year. We hope to see you there. Have a great rest of your day and a great start to your holiday season. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, Teresa. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, have a great day.
You